Happy Monday again, everybody. I am excited to be joined with Jonathan Juravich in just a second, which you're all very lucky because his first article with AOEU just came out today. So he will be joining us shortly. And he'll be talking a lot about empathy today. He's really knowledgeable about the topic, but also will be sharing some more. So I see that he has requested to join us. You are all going to be in for a treat. As you know, you're very excited. I'm glad to see you all here. Give us a quick shout out, a little hey for those of you. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Great. Good.
Good.
I'm so excited.
I see you're joining us from the shed, which you'll have to tell us about because it has to do with your first article that was published today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So, okay, well, before we get into that, real quick, can you just tell everybody that's in the live today who's joining us just a little bit about you?
Okay. Got some time. So, yeah, my name's Jonathan Juravich. I am an elementary art teacher in Ohio. I teach at this awesome school called Liberty Tree Elementary. Everything's like a tree, an acorn, right? And yeah, and I've been teaching for 16 years.
Nice.
I got 2 small kids of my own and this tiny shed that I'm in right now in my backyard.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Nice.
And I'm super excited to talk about empathy today because it's really, I guess, at the cornerstone of all of the work that I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge topic, but it also feels very palatable when, there's lots of resources we'll be sharing both from you and from, just so much out there. And I mean, I remember listening to you speak about empathy and about how you teach at one of the Art Ed Now conferences, and I was like, oh, Jonathan is so inspirational. So I'm excited to chat with you today. Okay, so let's go back to the fact that you are a new writer with the Art of Education University. There's usually a few writers on the team, and you are a new one, which means that your first article came out today, ironically. Perfect.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect. I mean, I woke up this morning and I was like, whoa.
There we go.
Article. Yeah.
Can you tell us what the article is called and what it is about?
Yeah, the premise of the article is about making space for teaching and creating, because we as art teachers are in this moment where, we had to figure out how to teach, to take care of ourselves, to live life, and then also to make art all within the same space. And
Right.
So what I did is I reached out to, I believe, 5 different art teachers from throughout the country, actually, to talk to them about like the spaces they make and what they look like, the things they thought about. And at the end of the article, I talk about what I did. And it was creating a studio in my backyard out of a shed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, which sounds, I downplay it, but it's beautiful in here. So,
I mean, if you guys haven't already read the article, you'll need to check it out because at the end of the article, there's pictures of your, like, I don't even want to call it a shed because it's like a beautiful, like, light wooden haven. And then you have skylights, which is amazing. Like,
yes.
What? Who
I
gets
know.
skylights in a shed?
I was looking at, and this is so funny, right? Because, and a lot of people, I wasn't sharing like the fact that I built this thing in my backyard with anybody, and then all of a sudden there's an article, right? But right. I was looking at just like normal standard sheds to put in my backyard, and I paid for it because we didn't go on a summer vacation. And
there you go.
Instead, Wayfair, actually of all places, like they had a deal, and I like went for it. So yeah, it's
Nice.
got like skylights, and it's kind of awesome and homey. I do have a space heater going because it did snow here. So yeah.
Nice. You got to set it up in your own cozy space. Are there any other upcoming articles that you're excited about? I mean, there's stuff being published daily, right? Whether it's podcasts or articles with the Art of Ed, but I know you have some more in the works, as writers always do. Is there anything else you're looking forward to sharing upcoming?
Yeah, I have 2 more, I think, in the month of February. One is on tiny art shows and like the ins and outs of creating your own tiny art shows and like the benefits of them.
Yes.
So that's one. And another one that ties in with kind of what we're going to talk about today is about creating emotional self-portraits with kids and how, we love smiley, happy self-portraits, but there's so much more to us as humans than just like those big old beautiful smiles. So it's getting kids to explore those emotions together. So yeah,
I love that. And I think That's exciting. I'm excited to hear more about those self-portraits too, because that can be a really tricky topic for students to just think about themselves in general, but also there feels this expectation that it has to like look neat or be happy or like be about a kind thing. But we can break down that barrier and have those conversations in the art room, which is perfect, right? So
Yeah.
I want to know a little bit more about that. But before we dig in too deep with that, I want to give people kind of a background on like, why are you sort of, I mean, an expert on empathy, but like you're passionate about it. You're passionate about sharing about it. You're passionate about teaching in that way. So can you tell us, I mean, you did a TED Talk, which is how do you teach with empathy? And during that talk, you had a bunch of really great, almost tips, right? Like little tidbits about how to talk to your own kids or your own students. Can you just give us kind of a recap about what that TED Talk was like and what it was about?
Yeah, I mean,
it was all about empathy. Yes.
I mean, like we could talk for a while on this.
Like, right? Give it right now. No,
yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Which, I mean, it's hopefully everyone gets a chance to check it out. But yeah, it's how do we teach empathy? Because it's like one of those topics where you're like, well, how do you? Aren't you just like born with it? But no, we have to like foster these discussions. And one of the things that we often do at home is we have a talk at the dining room table about like, tell me one point in the day where you felt happy. Tell me one point of the day when you were frustrated. Tell me about one point in the day where you laughed so hard you fell on the floor, right?
Yeah.
And those are examples that I kind of give in the talk too, because it's one thing to say, how was your day at school today, right?
Right.
But all of a sudden your mind goes blank and you're like, I don't know, how was my day at school? So
exactly.
I think prefacing those points to talk about the day in terms of emotions can really get us to understand ourselves, but then to understand each other too. So even us as adults, like I think that's almost something that we should run down. Be like, what was one part of the day that I thought was like so fun, right? Or like so funny, or I was frustrated, and like own it. So,
right. And like be okay and love those emotions and those feelings too, because like, so let's say for example we were having a conversation at your dinner table, Jonathan, and I was like, okay, you know, I didn't really feel frustrated today, or I felt really frustrated and like I hated feeling that way. Then doesn't it open a bigger conversation about like maybe a deeper feeling or emotion than like, yeah, it was a good day today, you know?
Yeah. And what's really cool too is as art teachers, like these are conversations we can and should have with students within our spaces too.
Right.
Because I mean, they often leave the art room like skipping and happy, and it was like super fun. But like there were moments when our students were frustrated. There were moments when this guy was super frustrated, right? So if we acknowledge that, I mean, we can help kids process the why. Like why? Like what one point of today was really frustrating? Maybe it's the way I taught it. Or maybe that it is a hard concept that we're like going to work towards. So I think that's really validating. Yeah.
I think that actually brings me to like, as a fellow art educator, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is interesting. We know how important it is to model for our students how we feel, how we make mistakes, how we problem solve in front of them so that they can feel comfortable to then do that themselves. But what kind of experience do you have with that in front of your students? Like, okay, Mr. J is super frustrated, or, you know, modeling that, because that leads me to one of the other conversational questions we're going to have, which is your connection with PBS and drawing with Mr. J, which is kind of like a compilation of having that conversation and making art and showing that it's okay to do those things with your students. So I just threw like 9 questions at you. Can you answer them all?
Like, where are we going to even start? Well, I think one of the things is just apologizing sometimes.
Yeah.
And I did have a student that was grown up that remembered this time when I apologized to his class because I did get frustrated and was upset, and they see that. And then immediately, if our kids are open to this fact that they're able to name emotions and like identify them, then they're like, oh my goodness, the teacher is frustrated. Why is that? Because that's empathy in practice, right? And sometimes it's that I need to change what's going on, or the kids need to change what's going on. But I think as adults, we have to be open to the fact that we need to apologize, and for kids to see that. Yes. Which I think is something that sometimes we put on the brave face, or we're always like, I'm always happy. I'm the art teacher.
Yeah.
Right? But no, I'm not.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's
something
frustrating sometimes.
Yes. Or even we're all very aware that we all are having issues with technology randomly, right? But I
Yep.
think just the kids empathize now more than ever whenever
Yes.
things don't work.
Yes.
Just
I
like,
literally, to interrupt, if I could, today I was teaching an online class and I got like kicked out of the class. I'm like teaching, right? 25 students and I'm just gone from the Google Meet. So then I enter back in, but my Wi-Fi is so poor that they can't see that I'm there, but I can hear them. And they're just like, well, maybe she tried, like, you know, and they're just trying to like troubleshoot why I would be gone. And it was just so sweet to sort of be a fly on the wall, hearing them be like, I bet she's just trying this, you know. It was like they get it, right? They understand that, but modeling that for them and showing them like, hey, I'm frustrated, or here's what happens, or I also made a mistake, is like mind blowing, right?
yes.
Yes.
And that's again, that's that empathy. Like the kids are like, I wonder if she's okay. Like
Yeah.
it's even something that small, right?
Right.
It's like,
right.
Is
And
she
then
all right?
even drawing attention to that too, right? That's part of why teaching empathy is so important, is because we're identifying it, right? So the fact that we're teaching students, this is what this feeling looks like, or this is how you can get bigger empathy muscles, is by acknowledging that and then turning towards that a little bit more. So let's now talk about PBS a little bit, because I know I had a couple people in the chat that said love your work with PBS, and I just recently found out about it, and it's so fun. So tell us kind of what the project is and what it looks like, what it's all about. Drawing with Mr. J through PBS.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, a local PBS, WOSU, they came out to my school to do a short little video on me for one of their programs that they have, an arts program. And they saw this drawing wall where I do quick draw challenges the moment the kids come into my classroom. Like, 2 minutes, just draw the prompt on the board. And they saw it and they're like, there's something to this. And then like fast forward a year and a half, and all of a sudden we're in this brainstorming session about like, is there a project in this? And so from that was born Drawing with Mr. J, which is a really short, each episode is like 3 minutes long, 4 cuts. And in it, it's a drawing prompt that's goofy, right? Like a fruit dance party is like one of the very first ones. And it starts off with this like goofy prompt, and then through it I'm drawing along with the kids, like talking about like what could yours look like that's not necessarily just like mine. And then it's kind of like a sneak attack about emotions, because like partway through there's this little animated version of me that starts talking about like, wait, how are you feeling? Right? Actually, tell me how you feel. And then at the very end, it always comes back to my own personal connections to the emotion that we're exploring. And then also a challenge to the kids to like, hey, these conversations are difficult, but use your drawing to have a conversation with a trusted adult. And then at the end, it's like, join me next time. So
Nice.
The production is so good because PBS is doing it, and the people that work on it are amazing. And there right now, I think there's only like 6-ish episodes, but over spring break, there are plans to do 4 more. So, funding is always a thing. But,
yes.
But it's really exciting. And then for teachers or parents, on the website, which I'm going to do a plug, wosu.org/Mr. J. On that website, there's each of the videos, but then there's also a companion guide that talks about like, here are discussion questions, here are books that you could read, here's some activities that you can do. So and my hope too is that teachers and kids will share their drawings on social media with the hashtag Drawing with Mr. J, so that I can see them and respond and be excited with them. So
totally. And I love, so I checked it out after we were kind of chit-chatting a little bit, and I watched like the donut playing a sport, right? It's like they're silly, so they're engaging for students, and you're drawing everything on Post-it notes, which I assume is similar to your actual classroom, right? Like walls of Post-its, quick prompts. So there's not a lot of pressure, or it shouldn't feel like there's a lot of pressure because of the fact that it's fast. But the way you so quickly are like, okay, here's a fun drawing prompt, but then how do you actually feel is so fun and developmentally appropriate specifically for elementary students. But you could even like amp this up a little bit with like a quicker fun drawing prompt, or like maybe a teamwork swap with, you know, I know it's hard when we're, you know, masks and all in person in space and all that craziness, but there's so many options about how to do this with students and to show that just talk about your feelings, right?
Yeah. And we field tested it with a bunch of different teachers. And I mean, classroom teachers have been using it. It's amazing when people will be like, I'm in Oregon and I found your thing and I'm sharing it with my students tomorrow. And I'll be like, that's amazing. So yeah, it's been really exciting. And I mean, middle school students have used it. There's been some high school teachers that have used it, especially during, you know, distance learning, being able to assign that. I mean, it does get you to stop and think about the experiences that you're going through. So,
yeah. And I mean, I don't teach high school, but I feel like it would be so fun. I just want high schoolers, I know this is hard, but like for them to be teachers if they're comfortable in their own way. Like maybe they could, like, what does that look like to record a little, like, hey, I'm going to do a fun drawing and now we're going to talk about it in a deeper level. So it gets this SEL connection. It gets you thinking about a fast, non-pressure drawing, but also, you know, it's like that's a fun way to think outside the box a little bit. Right. So many good ideas there, Jonathan. I love it. I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat here sharing how much they love those videos and are excited about a lot of the upcoming articles. Let's see. I see a game here. Whatchamadraw?
Yes.
Similar.
I have a friend that bought it for me.
Okay.
And it's, again, you could take so many ideas. I mean, because we're the creative ones here, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you can take so many ideas and, like, from Whatchamadraw it, I think is what it's called. It gives great drawing prompts. But then in your mind, you're like, what kind of conversations could we have after I give this great drawing prompt? I mean, some of the ones that we've done so far of episodes are like a unicorn with personality, right? Like that could go so many ways. Instead, we talk about like anxiousness, but like, you know, it's fun.
Yep. It's nice to talk about those big feelings in a way where it feels attainable, right? Because it's scary for a teacher, like, to have those vulnerable conversations. Like, we talk about the way we feel all the time in my classroom, but I always tell them, I'm like, sometimes it's hard to talk about it, and it makes me feel a little uncomfortable to talk about it, but it's okay. It makes us be closer and be stronger, right? I am excited to check out Whatchamadraw it. Like, thank you for sharing. That's fun too. Another friend was asking about what your show is called. It's Drawing with Mr. J, and I will be sure to link to where people can find those episodes in the Art of Ed Instagram stories right after our chat. So as soon as we get done, I'll share a bunch of other stuff that we've been chatting about, because I've got to work. Okay, so a few more questions for you, because you are a wealth of knowledge here. Part of what else I thought was very interesting about you as an educator and your school was your 2018 Ohio Teacher of the Year, which is an amazing accomplishment. So congrats, because that is, that's, I know you said a lot of people are like, oh, an art teacher, Teacher of the Year, but it's like, no, you are an educator. You are an amazing educator teaching students. So congratulations on that regard. And I know part of when you were speaking as your speech about that that award, you're talking about how your staff kind of came together to model behavior for students. And a lot of that, I think, had to do with empathy and fitting in line with our conversation about what does empathy look like and how can we show that. So can you talk a little bit more about your school culture and what modeling empathy looks like at your school? Yeah.
I have this really unique role. So I am the full-time art teacher. I teach everyone in the building. It's a full-time. But then on top of that, I also help oversee our building's culture and environment. And it's this really unique role that my principal created several years ago. And I love it. It drives so much of the work that I do. And again, I love that an art teacher is a part of it, because then everything is like really beautifully designed too.
Of course.
But but with it, we several years ago took this really hard look at the culture that we had at our school. And we thought that we were like the Disney World of schools. The kids are like skipping down the hallway. But then there were all these stories from kids where they were telling us about their experiences and things that just weren't who we believed we were.
Right.
And we did this very vulnerable thing where a group of teachers got together over the summer and we wrote everything out on like that big chart paper.
Mm-hmm.
And we wrote out the good, the bad, the really ugly, the things that we had noticed as teachers, the things we heard from kids. And through that, we developed our tree traits, which are, because again, Liberty Tree, right?
Yep.
Everything's,
yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is we selected 4 words and we were really intentional about it. And those 4 words are awareness, respect, empathy, and perseverance. And we talked about like, what do these words mean? How can you exhibit these different words throughout the building? And we created this whole like matrix chart about like, what does it mean to show respect in the cafeteria or empathy in the cafeteria? And I created all of these posters where leaves, like from the tree, are acting out all of
personified leaves. Could it
Yes.
get any more amazing than that?
So there's like a leaf, like cafeteria worker, right? Like,
Yeah.
out,
Can you please post these? Like, I want to
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Yeah. And like at recess, there's like acorns and leaves, like with hula hoops and stuff. So, so our whole goal was to make it incredibly student friendly.
Yes.
So that they could see these posters, these visuals, and actually understand what the words mean. And that's one of my major, like, one of the major challenges about a word like empathy is like, we tell kids to have it, kind of like respect, but
Sure.
they're like, what does that actually mean? Right?
Yeah.
So many times people use the walk in someone else's shoes, and that's cool for you and me, but like for a kindergartner, it's super crazy confusing, right? They're like, why is someone else's shoes?
Ew.
So actually defining things in kid-friendly terms and giving examples. And it's something that every classroom space in our building does. I mean, and we as a unified arts team come together and talk about like, how are we going to talk to kids about what respect and empathy look like in our individual spaces? So it's something that we all were a part of developing. So it really had great teacher buy-in. And our principal wasn't necessarily a part of it, but she supported it wholeheartedly. So
Good.
I think that's what matters.
Yes. Is feeling like you have that support. So then I'll ask the question that if I was watching this chat, I would want to know, how do you define empathy to your students? And how do you, because you said giving examples, right? So besides walking in their shoes, right? That can be helpful, but it might be a little confusing. What are your go-to examples and definitions for empathy to tell specifically young students?
Yeah. I often share that like before you get to empathy, I believe like awareness. I will sing from the mountaintops about awareness. Like I honestly think that like awareness of ourself and awareness of others leads to everything else, which to me an awareness means a noticing of what's going on in and around you so that you can make a choice, right? So you can have this empathetic action.
Yeah.
So I think it starts with awareness, which is in aligned with a lot of social emotional learning standards and curriculum. And then it jumps to, then you go to empathy, which is understanding the situations or feelings that someone else is experiencing. Right? So understanding that, I mean, that's hard. That's hard. But I think for me in the art room, what I see most is whenever I am really sharing about an artist and their life, and like who they are, like introducing several artists to kids. The moment I'm sharing that and I see the kids sitting there like this, like they immediately are engaged with what I'm sharing. Vincent Van Gogh was a great example with kindergarten. I introduce him to the students and I don't ever talk about the ear thing. It's not a thing we do. But we do talk about the fact that like his work wasn't appreciated when he was alive. That, you know, he had, we talk about mental health. Yeah. And the kids are just, they want to make artwork for Van Gogh. It does help that I have a puppet of him too. But But I mean, that action of empathy, like they're seeing it and experiencing it.
Yes.
So yeah. So
do you ever compare that conversation of empathy with sympathy? Because I feel like that's sometimes a word that maybe kids would recognize a little bit more, but it's like closely related to the point where like, okay, how many feelings do we bring into this conversation? You know what I mean?
Right. And I think because we as a building like bought in fully to empathy, right?
Yeah.
Is that like it's one of our words. One of my favorite nights was I was at work working late, and a dad was walking down the hallway and saw a poster with his kid. He picked him up from like the Latchkey after school program, and he saw a sign that said like empathy, and it was like going out to the playground. And the dad said like, "So, how did you show empathy today at school?" And like I'm like dancing around in the art, like, what is that? Yeah!
You're like, put a cup against the wall and you're like, let me hear what he says.
And I think that that's important because what we did is the school counselor and I last fall, we, during parent teacher conference night or curriculum night, we held 3 different presentations on social emotional learning and our tree traits for parents. It was completely, and so we stood up in front of, we did it actually 6 times because we did it 3 times each night, but we gave them resources. We talked to them about the words we use at school, why we use these words, where they can find resources at home. And it was really impactful because the number of parents that were there taking notes, because we want to build a bridge, right?
Yeah.
So I think as many times as we, even as art educators, can share with parents at home, like these are the conversations we're having and why.
Yeah.
I mean, there's great buy-in there.
I mean, completely. And let's talk just a little bit more about that because, you know, as the art teacher, we're so much more than that, right? Just like any educator in the school, you're not just in 2nd grade and that's it, but there's a bigger picture there. So that's why we're talking about empathy in the way that we are today, because it's a grand way to try to build good humans, and it happens to happen in the art room, right? Yeah. So how do you feel like you were able to get the support for that? Because I was thinking, or I saw a comment from J. Tomcup who said, how did you have the time to do the additional work? Meaning, I assume during the summer, you kind of like collaborating with those other staff members. Like it's a big job, and sometimes there's not maybe the focus put on that. So can you tell us, or maybe give some advice on like how you started those conversations? How can you support parents? Because like that's almost the ticket, is how do you give those parents the resources so then we can encourage this everywhere? Just give us a few like hints on what that looks like maybe.
Yeah, I mean, us coming together as a school, it was really starting with an email saying like, hey, like we're gonna have these conversations. These conversations matter to our school.
Yeah.
But we need one representative from each grade level. And what was amazing is like it included at least one, if not many more, like our librarian, our music teacher. I mean, we even brought the conversation to our cafeteria workers, because it's like, this is important. It's in all of us.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for me to talk about empathy and respect and awareness in the art room, and it's powerful and meaningful, especially because for me, I see kids from kindergarten to 5th grade.
Yes.
And I for the longest time, I coached for the purpose of working with the kids for the next 3 years after that too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thinking.
But I mean, it's one thing for me to do it on my own, but for a whole school community to come together, like that's what becomes powerful. And that's when kids realize that it's not just about one individual space, it's about their whole lives.
Right.
It's about when they leave our school. And so we have had conversations about like, wait, we need to sit down with the middle school that all these kids go to and talk to them more about like what we're doing here that's different than the other elementary school that feeds to the same middle school. And, you know, there are some things with that. And as far as time, it's the most challenging thing, because there's never enough time to do everything, right? And yet when it's something that you care about so deeply, like you somehow make and find the time for it. And I mean, I think during this crazy adventure that is my life, that I found that like social emotional learning awareness, empathy is really what my work has always been about. I just didn't have a common language to share those conversations with other people. So that's what I'm excited about, especially with the umbrella of SEL, is because now we can learn from one another. Like this conversation would have been very different several years ago, right? So
yeah, probably. Yeah. I think so. There's definitely more support and more conversation. And I mean, maybe a hint for that individual that was asking about how did you get the support for it? I don't know about what your district looks like, but in certain districts, there's like required professional development. So perhaps you can like go to your administration and say like, hey, I'm really passionate about like learning more about SEL and incorporating that in my classroom, doing something for our school. Maybe you already have things in place that are happening at your school right now, but there's ways to build that even more. And if you're going to take that professional development time, like it's there, right? There's SEL packs that are pro packs through the Art of Ed. There's articles we can read. There's things that we can do that already exist, and to take the time towards your professional development might make it feel a little less like extra time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and then 3 Ladybug 10, I love people's names.
I know.
Said that bus drivers are the first and last safe person they see and hear. And I have to tell you that I'm the bus duty guy. I rule bus duty. I'm out there with my walkie, sometimes in a funny costume, but yeah. But I love that because I'm the first person like in the building that they see in the morning when they get there. But I know full well that those bus drivers, again, are getting them to and from school safely. So every fall, we have a meeting with the bus drivers where we go through our tree traits and we actually give them paper certificates that they can give to the kids. Because, again, they are with them. They're a part of this community in this conversation. So having a bus driver say like, thank you for being respectful on the bus today. Just that acknowledgement goes a really long way. And I'm always one that says like, hey, after you say like, thank you for being respectful, explain why. Like, this is what you did. So that hopefully they'll continue doing that in the future.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that's something we have to train ourselves to do too. It's how, in your example from earlier on when we were talking about your TED Talk on empathy, instead of saying, how was your day? Say, tell me about a time when you felt this way, or what kind of major feelings did you have today? Or teaching ourselves to ask a more in-depth question, right? So there's a little bit more meat to it instead of just that surface. And I see a lot of people talking about that SEL excitement because there's obviously so much there to build good humans. And again, we know the art place is an amazing place for that to happen because most of the time we see all of the students in our class, in our school, if not everyone. And, you know, they're excited to be there and there might be more time for a conversation. So it's a perfect place to incorporate those things into how we teach. So I know sorry, go.
I was going to say that if anyone's like, I am so passionate about this work that I want buy-in from other people. The other thing to do is to look at what your state is doing for social emotional learning. Are there already workshops that are happening? Are there SEL standards? Which immediately, when those were rolled out in Ohio, people are like, wait, are we going to test kids on awareness? And I was like, no. But when you read them, they are actually amazing starters for you to be like, oh, wait, I already do this really well. Or if I just change this one project just slightly, or if I engage students in this way. So I would seek out, like, what does your state have as far as supports for that? Because there's probably great resources that are out there that are just out of reach because we just don't know they exist. So a little Googling.
Get looking, right? And also, I mean, I'll speak from my own personal experience is that connecting with other educators and becoming passionate about like those bigger issues or like trying to tweak the ways you teach will hopefully stop like teacher burnout because you know what, it can get really exhausting and being like, hey, I got these teammates that I talk with either at my school or somewhere else, or you know, I'm really passionate about like teaching my kids about mental health. There's something deeper there that makes you feel like it's it's scratching below the surface a little bit more, and it makes that job really meaningful. And I think it just speaks to a little different level of who we are as educators. So I think you would kind of connect with that, because I get that vibe from you, Jonathan, is like, that's why you're an educator, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Who
completely.
knew?
What? There's so much there. Okay, so let's talk real quick about some of the lessons. I know at the beginning of our conversation, you were telling us about some of those self-portraits, feeling self-portraits. I know you've also done some really cool projects with like a dot project where kids were donating towards school in need. You could probably explain that a little better than me. So can you tell us about some projects that are more focused around empathy, that are a little more visual?
Yeah, and I think the thing is that we have to be open to students and what they are observing in the world. A lot of that comes down to that awareness piece again, because students of all ages are way more aware than we realize. I mean, there's times where we'll be talking at dinner and you can see that my 7-year-old, she's listening like this, because she's like taking it all in and processing. And then there's that moment where I'm like, do you have any questions? Right? So we have to be aware. So in the TED Talk, I talk about this experience that was driven by 4th graders where we had been learning about, earlier in the year, we learned about Yayoi Kusama and all of her polka dots. We learned about Tyree Guyton from Michigan, who also covers like entire houses with polka dots. Mm-hmm. And I believe the book is Magical Trash. I believe that's what it's called. Google it later. Okay. So
Trash, I think. Yes.
Yeah. And so we had been talking about them, and then we switched to like talking about different architecture. And that's right whenever Hurricane Harvey hit Houston. And students came in because they know that the art room is this safe place to have conversations. And they're asking about like how the hurricane would affect buildings, how would it affect people's lives? And because we were talking about buildings, right? Mm-hmm. So really interesting experience that turned into this realization that the art rooms of kids in Houston were being impacted, and like they know that their art teacher is a hoarder, so like there's art supplies everywhere. So imagine what would happen to art rooms in Texas. So what we ended up doing is I used that blue styrofoam insulation stuff that comes in like big sheets, and we turned it into like a 5-foot tall house that was like a sculpture, and they ended up painting it, and then the roof was covered with all these paper polka dots. And the premise that the kids came up with, which again, it gives me chills to think that kids, spiraled this, but is that for every art supply that a 4th grader donated to a school in Houston, they got to decorate a polka dot and put it on the roof. And so kids were bringing in bags of art supplies. And of course, me being the teacher who was just like, this is amazing, I forgot to even like contact a school in Houston. So imagine that, right? Like, because there's so much going on up here, and I'm still teaching kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, right? So then it was like, okay, how do I find a school in Houston that's in need? And through a friend of a friend, I was able to connect with a school that everything was lost. All of their furniture, all of their supplies. And so we were able to send the supplies to the art teacher, who was actually teaching out of another building. And she sent back photos of the kids opening the boxes.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it was real because my students saw that these were kids just like them, right? Mm-hmm. Just like them. And I will never forget the kid that was like, I have those shoes. And they're like, yeah, I bet you do.
Connections, empathy, awareness.
Yep. Yeah. And so, this was an amazing thing. And then shortly after, something else was happening in the global world. And the kids immediately were like, what are we going to do for the people there? And I was like, wow, but see, it started something in them. Yes. They're going to think about the world differently.
Right.
And so I have this amazing opportunity where in a normal year, I get to see my 1st graders twice, like a 5-day rotation. So let's say twice a week. And it's like, I actually see them for two different classes, like traditional art and then something we call art enrichment in our district. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm processing reimagining art enrichment to be an all service learning based class, so that every time that we're doing something or creating something, it's with the purpose of like impacting someone else. Yeah. Now that's going to take a lot of thinking and planning,
a lot of fear. Yep.
Right. But I mean, think about the resources in your community or the centers in your community that impact the people right there. Right. And it can be something super small. I mean, before all of this happened, there was several residential facilities that went in around our house or around our school for the elderly. And we were talking about, like, could we build a partnership between those schools and or between our school and there? And like, could we create artwork for the citizens that are living there? And of course, things got a little different, but that doesn't mean it'll be this way forever. So
yes, completely. Yeah. I mean, that's you're giving. I mean, this 3 Ladybug 10 said it perfectly. She said, you're planting empathy seeds, right? You're giving kids the tools to be like, ooh, something's growing in here. I gotta feed that. I gotta take care of it so that I can be empathetic and continue to care for people, because that feels good. And it feels good as a human in all regards, right? Well, now I have to ask, that first grade class, is it just first grade that you get to see twice?
Yes. So the way our school is structured, our district, we have 15 elementary schools, which for a suburban school district where we are, I mean, that's fairly large. Yeah. But we created a structure where like 2nd and 5th graders get double PE, and 3rd and 4th get double music, and then 1st gets double art, and we see our
okay. So they just get like double through the years.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so, and it's right now, art enrichment is a way for them to explore materials. So it's like, we learn about pencil, and we like read books about pencil, and we watch videos that we made about pencils, and they learn like what a pencil can do. And then we move on to Sharpies and then markers. It's amazing. But then I'm like, okay, now let's take that and insert service learning.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm excited.
I think that's gonna be really impactful. I'm excited to see. And now that you put it out into the universe, Jonathan, you gotta stand true.
I do have to tell you that, I mean, and this isn't like a pat on my back thing, but as an elementary art teacher, sometimes we send kids out into the world after 5th grade, and like, we wonder what happens, right?
Yeah.
And a couple weeks ago, a student from my student teaching, and I student taught high school, which meant I was only a couple years older than a student reached out to me on Facebook to tell me about like how proud he was of the work that I'm doing, and how the work that like we had done together, 16 years ago in class. Yes. And it's those little moments that like we impacted students, we planted those empathy seeds, and and we are doing it even if we don't realize it. So and of course then I was like,
I feel all the things now. But that's beautiful. And I think it's those little snippets of love or awareness, right? Giving back that acknowledgement to someone else, because especially now, just like seeing somebody and being like, hey, I like that you did that thing, or like that, we just need that connection and love and admiration, because it's hard when it feels like it's not there. So I'm glad that individual thought enough to reach out to you, because a lot of people don't, and maybe they'll just think and it'll pop in their head, oh man, I had a really cool art teacher when I was in elementary school, and then it disappears. But taking that extra step to share is a really meaningful thing. So if any of y'all are out there,
we as adults need to do the same thing.
You're right.
There was one teacher in our school that, like, because I have 2 doors, right? They like come in one and go out the other. And she was all business. And she came in and said, okay, I handled this, this, and this. And she was about to go out. And I said, thank you. Thank you for all of the work you're doing to pull off this event. And I am actually, and to another adult, I was like, and I'm actually really proud to see you step into this leadership role. And it like took her back. But Because we don't say that to each other.
Totally.
But we should.
Especially being proud. Like we say it, I think, a lot to kids, like, oh, I'm proud of how you focused today. But to tell another adult that you're proud of the way of something they're doing is like kind of one of the biggest compliments, I feel like. It's like, I feel that for you. So you're right. There's so much modeling that we do for our students, but of course it always comes back to how we treat each other. You know, any human to human interaction, right? Or anybody in anything in this world. Yes. Okay, don't let me forget about your self-portraits, Jonathan. Tell me about your feeling self-portraits. Like, how do you teach that lesson about empathy? And it's not just like a smiling face.
Yeah. So article should be coming out in February.
Okay.
And the premise of it is I gather first graders normally on the carpet, but at their seats. And we talk about and brainstorm every feeling that they can think of. And the example I always give is it's like, okay, oh yes, I read The Invisible Thread, 3 Ladybug 10. I have it for my kids. We gather them together, we brainstorm all the feelings. And normally it starts out like happy, sad, grumpy. And then I always use the example that Bennett, of course, said, flabbergasted. To the whole class. And then I'm like, yes, first grader, please explain flabbergasted to all of your classmates. But as we're like brainstorming these, I have the kids like make the feelings on their faces about like, what does it look like when you're experiencing this emotion, right? We look at images of artwork from art history because very rarely are there pictures of people like this, right? Like they're normal.
Right.
Going through somebody of their emotions. So we look at those images, and then just like old style like photo strips from like a photo booth, I have them create 4 self-portraits that explore 4 different emotions. And for first graders that are learning how to draw the face, like where the eyes go, the nose, it's a very simple next step from, hey, I taught you how to draw yourself happy and smiley. Now show me 1 or 3 other emotions or 4 totally different emotions. And sometimes the work that comes out of it is so incredibly expressive. My favorite is the kid that drew like smoke coming out of their ears.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm furious. I was like, yes, you are.
Yeah, so, I can tell.
Yeah. But getting kids to acknowledge that they do experience all these emotions is important alone. And then being able to like observe them, being aware of them, because again, that awareness brings about that empathy. Like, how is your mom or your grandmother feeling about something, or how is your teacher experiencing this? Gives them a chance to like actually take action. So
completely I love that. You're encouraging me to try to take like those self-portrait conversations or lessons and just dig a little bit deeper, right? Especially like those younger students. I know we're working on a self-portrait project right now, inspired by a previous chat with Miss Paula Lees, who has some really great conversations about identity and like how there's more to our identity than just what the visual surface, what we see. And so that was already pushing the conversation in a really beautiful way. But I was teaching the lesson to students, and I was like, okay, eyebrows are probably one of the most important parts of your face because it tells how somebody feels. And so I'm like here in my mask, and I'm like, can you tell how I feel? Can you tell how I feel? And I'm like doing all these weird faces, and I'm like, guys, you can't even see my face, but you could tell how I feel because of my eyebrows. So,
I mean, with these things, I'm expressive.
Go about, baby. But I agree. I mean, taking a seemingly simple or surface level project like a self-portrait and pushing it just a little further. How can we bring in that conversation about feelings, about SEL, about what our students are feeling most of the time, right?
Anyone that's taught their kids or introduced Frida Kahlo to students, who has given them even a sliver of what her life was like, I mean, immediately the kids are like, like they are bought in, they have been sold, they care about this woman, and yet also are intimidated by her. Like they're feeling all those feelings. So I mean, and that's exhibited in these self-portraits. Completely. There's so many ways to again, just digging a little deeper, encouraging
as the theme of our chat, right, encouraging that empathy. So we're making those safe places for those conversations to happen with our students. Okay, so before I have you leave us with kind of like any more plugs, any more information you want to share with us, I'm gonna quick do our giveaway for our amazing holographic sticker. It's blinding, Jonathan. So here is our question for those of you that haven't been in our chat for this before. To get your hands on one of these amazing stickers, all you have to do is be the first person to answer this question that I will put out to the universe in the chat, and it'll be the first answer that I see that's correct, because sometimes internet is weird, so I'm going to see the first one that I see. Okay, here's the question. Type it into the chat. What was the topic of Jonathan's TED Talk? And I just need one word. What was the topic of Jonathan's TED Talk that he gave? I should make up like a cool dance with this, maybe. You guys.
Oh,
yay! Okay, Elaine Ceramics. I was chatting with her today. She was a student of yours, right?
yes. Elena is, I'm also an adjunct instructor at Otterbein University, which is where I went to school. And Elena is one of my future art teachers, and she is amazing.
Yay!
And her ceramics are incredible. Everyone should go check them out.
Yes, I will. Girl's got a sticker coming her way. Y'all should go check her out. Okay, Alain. Elena, I will send you a message so that you can get your super cool sticker. Thank you everybody else for being here in the chat. And we're going to just end with a simple, like, what parting words of encouragement do you have for us, Jonathan, moving forward, focusing on empathy, but just like as we move forward through weird times, what do you have for us?
Yeah. So, I don't know, many years ago, like 8-9 years ago, I was asked by this organization, to come up and find one quote that defines my life. And I was like, what? What? And it wasn't even my own quote. It was like a quote from like somebody else. And if you watch the TED Talk, you'll find that like I have this deep connection because of my grandmother, who was blind, to Helen Keller. I always have, from like being a young kid. And so this quote is one that I attribute to my life, that I feel like, you know, could be imparted words of some kind of wisdom, which is, her quote is, "I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but it is my chief duty to accomplish small tasks as if they're great and noble." Ooh. And right?
Yeah,
I know, there's so many, and the way that I simplify it for kids is it's like small acts with big impact. Because there's small things that we can do every day to make a big impact for other people. And it doesn't have to be that, you know, we do this crazy big event or that we are biting off way more than we can chew. Because I'm sure there's some people right now that are like, ooh, I've got big ideas of what I'm going to start tomorrow, right? But even those small little actions, as long as we do them with our heart and with all of our might, we can make a big impact for other people. So yeah.
I mean, yes, I'm gonna leave it at that because I couldn't say it any better than that. And I found this chat to be so inspiring, and I think it will hopefully make us just think a little bit more and to try to be the best educator that we can be for our students and just the best people we can be. So thank you for giving us all those snippets. I'm gonna be posting a lot more fun stuff to go check out from Jonathan, including his article from today, as well as his TED Talk and his PBS silly drawings. So be sure to check out our story because there's a lot more information coming your way. And of course, give Jonathan a follow. Anywhere else that they can follow you besides your Instagram here?
I'm also on the Twitter. So at J Juravich is here for Instagram and for Twitter. So you can follow along there.
Perfect.
And yeah, I think that's it.
Great. Well, have a good night in your shed. The light has changed so dramatically.
The light is going, I mean, the sun is going down. The light is changing. I bought a tripod for this. I'm so proud of you. Thank you.
I'm so proud of you. All right, y'all. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us. Bye, Jonathan.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.